like I said, we'll give people a chance to log on here. It's a couple minutes after 8. People probably started panicking when they didn't see me coming on right at 8 o'clock. The first week that I did this, I had Lang on from New York, and we had technical difficulties for close to an hour before we got it figured out, and then we had a great interview with Denny. So, and I don't know if you probably haven't had a chance to look at this. You've been so busy, but Denny Lang was week number 1, and then I had Smith and Alexandra Lilly on in week number 2.
Wow.
From there, I had Jay Wood from Minnesota on. After that, I had Gib Marcucci on from Iowa. And then 2 weeks ago, yeah, Gib was great. And then 2 weeks ago, I had Doug Chiflett on. So yeah, so some real diversity.
You've had lots of questions.
You know, and there's always answers. So it's funny, you don't realize until you ask who might be willing to do this kind of thing. And Gib, I mean, he was good to go, and his daughter Cindy set it up and got us set up. It was great. So I mean, pick a better Hackney legend than Gib Marcucci to have on the thing.
Not in my lifetime. Not in my lifetime. I've known him since I was a small boy, and it was an awful lot of fun following his work and his ponies. And then as I grew older, it was easy for me to appreciate the talent in the ponies that he touched and the people and the owners that he had. So it was a lot of fun, and he certainly made other pony owners or other trainers, rather, he probably kept them quite honest and hardworking, because he was going to set the standard pretty high. And the interesting thing about him is that it was very normal for me to catch him cleaning his own harness out in the hallway. And he had help there, but the help didn't clean the harness before the big evening, whatever evening that was, that he was out there doing that himself.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, we're talking about Gib right now. Cindy Ireland, his daughter, has said hello here. She always watches these. Hi, Cindy. We're just, Mitch and I are just having a little bit of friendly banter as we wait for the audience to come in. We've got 26 sets of eyes on this so far, and that's usually times 2 at least, Mitch, because couples are watching this, and you know, they're coming in fast and furious. And what a lot of people will do, I've learned, is the people that can't tune in tonight, they'll sit and watch this tomorrow morning when they're having their Sunday morning breakfast or coffee, because once we go off the computer, this gets saved automatically forever on my Facebook page, and I'll share it to Vicky's page so your friends can watch it.
Great.
And I know that it's 3 a.m. in South Africa right now, so I don't imagine you've got any in-laws tuning into this right now.
No, sir. I expect they're probably preoccupied at this point.
Most likely. Well, let's see. It is now 5 minutes after 8. We've got a decent crowd. I know more are coming, so I'm going to get started on this thing right now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Saturday Night Tack Room Talk. As always, I'm your host, Bill Keith, and this is our 6th and final interview of the series. I started this thanks to some very, very friendly urging from Maureen Campbell, and it's gone very, very well. When I talked to this gentleman on the phone a few weeks ago to come on the show, he said that he wasn't sure if anybody would even remember the horses and ponies that he's had, or whether they'd be even interested in hearing stories from them. For me, this would be the equivalent of a baseball fan getting to interview Nolan Ryan. I booked this interview back on January the 14th, and it was so hard to not announce it sooner than 2 weeks ago. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I am welcoming the 2014 World Championship Horse Show Hall of Fame inductee, Mitch Clark. Mitch, thank you so much for your time tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Great. The hardest thing about doing this interview tonight, Mitch, I think, is going to be not talking about one horse for 2 hours, and you know exactly who I'm talking about. We'll get to him for sure. But what I like to do is, what I do with all of these interviews, I like to start with some background on my guests. Denny Lang, Smith Lilly, and Jay Wood were all raised, or all currently live where they were raised. Where were you born and raised?
I was born about 30 miles from where I live, and my family moved a little bit in my younger days, I would say while I was in grade school, and then I've been in Danville the biggest part of my life, and I spent 10 years in California, but other than that, I've been in Danville, Kentucky.
So as a young person, did you play any sports? Was there any sports that you were interested in growing up?
I was in the band, and I played football until I got to high school, and then the band actually was probably the better way to move because the band ended up winning contests and going out of state in football. Our high school football team rarely made it out of the regions, and so if you want to travel and have some fun, you need to be in the band.
Did you go on to college after high school?
I attended a couple of years of college and decided that my grandfather was getting older. It made absolutely no sense to me to finish college, have him later in life than where he was. He was riding horses then, and it seemed like the best time to go ahead and get as much experience from him as I could. And I felt like I could always go back to school any other time of my life. So I jumped on that opportunity and have not been sorry.
Well, obviously, your mother was a Bradshaw. Did your father have horses growing up?
No, sir. He had a music degree and fell in love with my mother in high school. They were high school sweethearts, and he lived in town. His father was a railroad conductor. He was never around any type of animal, and he sort of learned the trade, as for a better way to put it, as he spent more time on the farm. Later, as he moved here, then he spent more time helping my grandfather. And my grandfather had about 1,100 acres, and he really ran the farm, and it let my grandfather stay in the barn and train horses, and he ran everything else.
Okay. What have you got for siblings?
Well, I had a brother and a sister, and I'm the only one left. I've lost both of them. They were both younger than me, and I'm the only one left in my family at this point.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Were they involved in horses when they were around?
My brother rode a little when he was younger and decided to go another route, and my sister was so much younger than me that it was harder for her to have an opportunity at that point. And I really don't think that she never really rode much, never had much interest in it. Appreciated following what I was doing, but didn't have any. She went into law. She had a lot more fun in a completely different background.
Kind of answered this question already. When did you start working for your grandfather, the legendary Garland Bradshaw?
Well, I started helping after school when I was quite young, and then I would work on all the Saturdays that I could acquire. And then when I was back every weekend from college, and then it kind of lended itself. He was about to lose a trainer, and it seemed like maybe this was the right time. And then I started, and that was, I guess I was 22 or 23 years old. I started helping him when the last assistant trainer had left. I was there, but just not in a full-time capacity beforehand. And then that was when I went on and committed to that. And thankfully I said, no, thankfully he took me on. I was tickled to that. I'm not sure I was offering a lot, but I was interested, that's for sure.
So the list of trainers that did work for your grandfather over the years is impressive. Give us some of the names of people that worked for your grandfather and went on to have successful careers in the saddle horse industry.
Well, Jack Nevitt, Lee Shipman, Carter Cox, Larry Hodge, Jim Kohler, Bill Becker. I'm just trying to think. I'm sure I've omitted somebody, and for that I'll be extremely sorry later, but these are the guys that come up first that I can quite remember.
Impressive list. Incredible. I mean, so many trainers would be lucky to have any one of those men, and they're legendary. I mean, obviously Larry Hodge, Jim Kohler, 8 stake winners, Carter Cox, one of the best ever with a fine harness horse. Incredible. Smith Lilly talked about learning from Carter Cox up until the day he retired. So now, did your grandfather ever suggest to you that maybe you should work for some other trainers to get a different perspective on the industry, or no?
No, sir. He really never tried to steer me in another direction. I got to visit and go with him a lot of places as we visited other farms and got to observe, but he never felt like this would be something that I needed to do to sort of round out my knowledge. I guess and that's just the way he had handled it so far. And I was trusting completely in whatever advice he could give me at that point. As green as I stayed, I needed all the help I could get.
So how old were you? When did you hang your own shingle and open your own barn?
Oh gosh. Well, I would say that I was probably about 25, somewhere in there, 25, 20, somewhere in there. I started first working part-time and had to sell stereos at night. So I would get up in the morning. I had 2 horses in training, and I would get them and help my grandfather with a few of his horses. And then at around midday, I went and opened up a stereo shop and closed it. I was there from 12 to 9 at night, did that 6 days a week. And so I had a full week, but it was what it took to try to get the thing started.
I thought you were going to say you sold stereos out of the back of a van in dark alleys. Sounds legit.
Oh gosh. Now you're cutting up sound-wise, and I'm not real sure exactly why that is, but I'll continue to try to hang in here.
Okay. You can hear me now, okay?
Yeah,
okay.
Right. It's fine.
We'll do what we can with free software here. So what was your first world champion?
A horse called Darlene's Dilly, and it was a 2-year-old gaited colt that a man by the name of Everett Tucker, who was a cow farmer, had bought out of my grandfather's dispersal sale for $900. And he bought it as a yearling, and we won the 2-year-old gaited class the next year. That was my first one. That was probably 1978.
Okay. Speaking of 2-year-old gaited horses, this lends well right into what's probably going to be the main topic of our discussion here tonight. On June 14th, 1977, a stud colt sired by Flight Time out of Aries Golden Gift, bred by Mrs. Judson Large of Chicago, Illinois, is born and named Skywatch. To your knowledge, was he ever shown as a baby or a yearling?
I'm pretty sure he was not. When he came to me as I guess he was a late yearling. When he came to me as a late yearling, he was not broke to lead. He jumped off a 3-horse van, didn't use the ramp, landed on the ground, and we herded him into the stall, kind of like you would a cow or another farm animal. You didn't need to handle him because he didn't know anything about that yet. So we herded him in, and that was the beginning of his training career. Didn't know how to lead.
You answered a question before I was going to ask you when you got him, and you got him as a late yearling, and you also answered the question I was going to ask, had anything been done? Obviously not, if that's the case. I read an article, Mrs. Large wanted him to be a harness horse,
yes,
but he quickly let you know that that was not going to happen. Why?
Yeah. That horse was entered into futurity, and she had been a very valued customer of my grandfather. And I had gotten this colt based on his assurances to her that he would look in on me and keep tabs on her colt in her behalf. And she had reminded him that he was into futurity, and she was counting on this colt going to show as a 2-year-old in harness, which was the only division 2-year-olds could show in. And I proceeded to break him to long line, and then I got ready to hook him, and he broke a set of harness. And so I worked on that for a couple of days, got ready to hook him again, and I broke another set of harness. And I think it was a few days after that where I thought it's time to try again. I broke the 3rd set of harness. We had one more set of harness in there, and my grandfather walked out in the hallway and assured me that we were probably done for the time being, and that the 1 set of harness actually would probably go to a better cause by not being put on that colt. And he suggested that maybe I go ahead and rack him to see if you possibly might be able to get more of his attention. And that was what forced us into a gaited career.
I read an article. Actually, I reread the article today the Saddle Horse Report had done about him, and you were quoted in there as saying, "I broke him to ride out of self-defense."
Yes. That's absolutely the truth. When he broke all these pieces of equipment, it was you could have he was in the air at the time. It was not any kind of a boring kind of thing. Every one of those accidents were quite spectacular in that particular moment. So he meant business, and he didn't want to be jogged at that time, and he held out till he got his way.
Well, those who are tuning in tonight, including myself, who have certainly had ponies and horses clean themselves when we're getting them broke or break harness, feel a lot better knowing that Skywatch broke at least 3 sets of harness as a
Rapidly,
2-year-old.
one after
Amazing.
another. Yes.
Amazing. His incredible career under saddle began with you in 1979. People have often said that he could have been trimmed and shown as a walk trot horse. Was that ever considered?
No, sir. I don't think so. I think that horse, as a 2-year-old, he probably wasn't as he got more attractive. I thought the older he got, and he got a little stretchier to me. In my liking, I thought as a 2-year-old, he more or less should have been gated anyway, based on his conformation. And so that was more or less where we came up with that. But I hope that helps.
Those of you that are just tuning in right now, we are talking about Skywatch, of course. In 1979, he wins the 2-year-old 5-gated world championship in a class of 17 entries. Michelle McFarland would buy him in the fall of his 2-year-old year. When Michelle bought him, Mitch, was it just understood that this horse is not for sale, so just don't even entertain offers on him?
No, I don't think at that time that was the case at all. I think that she just sort of waited to see kind of what he might develop as. And of course, if you're buying a colt that's even won its 2-year-old class at Louisville, you're not necessarily anticipating what was put in her lap as time kept on going. I think that it was interesting, as I'm sure she wanted to try this and wanted to try that in the best way that he might fit her schedule. And I doubt seriously if she meant to buy me a horse to show. But that's how it turned out, at least for the first part of his career. And once you get going on that, it's kind of hard to want to change what has been anything but expected and certainly appreciated.
Obviously, you had a number of horses for Michelle over the years after Skywatch. Was that your first business dealings with her, the purchase of Skywatch?
Yes, that's the first time I'd ever met her. Yes, sir. They came in one evening and wanted to see him, and I'd already worked him, and I told them I could show him tomorrow. And they said, well, we're here from California. And I said, I understand that, but that horse has been worked twice already today. And I'd be glad to show him to you tomorrow. And if you want to see him, we'll do that. But I can't make any exception to that. And at that point, the biggest part of me knew I didn't want to get rid of him if I could help it. This was the nicest thing I'd ever touched. And so it was difficult to even want to consider it, but you're in business and you've got to do what you've got to represent your owner in their best interest.
For sure. So in 1980, he returns to Freedom Hall, wins the 3-year-old 5-gated stallion and gelding class. 1981, back again, wins the junior 5-gated stallion gelding and the junior world grand championship. Did you let him dictate his own pace on how quickly he learned, or did you ask him to try a little more sometimes than maybe he was ready for?
I spent most of my time trying to figure out how to harness the personality and to find a way for me to fit in with that particular plan of operation in that horse's head. He was a stud that was difficult, and I had to find a way to get along with that. For a better way of putting it, I had to figure out how to walk in step with him and not take away from what made him special.
As he got older and more experienced, did he learn how to relax at home, or was he just always on?
For me, for the most part, he was pretty much on. Now, oddly enough, later, when I did finally successfully break him to jog, you could go out and jog that horse, and that horse would jog, and his natural motion would be
we were talking about Skywatch. You had just explained that you were able to finally break him
Yes.
to jog, and yeah,
That
and
was
so
where,
actually,
that was where he was the most. You could relax him at a jog because his natural trot was I would say 8 to 10 inches off the ground. If you jogged him, he looked like he didn't have any shoes on at all. No motion. I would be at a horse show. Very successful trainers would ask in the morning, "When are you going to work that horse?" And I would have him hooked in a harness at that point. And I said, "This is him." And they were like, "No, no, no, no." So I'd turn around and shake him and cluck to him, and he would change his way of moving. And my great uncle had a big time one morning with Red Crabtree as he won a bet, and they had a big time with that because when he was relaxed, he didn't move anything like the show horse that we are talking about. So I was tickled to finally get him broke to drive it, but when he did, you could let him rest and just do some slow miles without all that
it's interesting
work.
because one of the questions I've written down to the word is, could he go for a relaxed jog just to get his cardio up? And you just answered that.
Sure, yeah, he very much could do that. Once you got on him, there wasn't too much relaxation after that. It was a game of chess, I guess, for a better way of putting it. But jog cart wise, he was very placated in doing kind of whatever you wanted to do at whatever rate you kind of wanted to do that, and it wasn't a real problem.
So you told me when we spoke on the phone the first time you talked about him, and you said that you had to work him twice a day, and you actually mentioned that earlier in the interview.
Sure.
Did you have to work him? Did you have to work him hard twice a day, or just get him out of the stall twice a day? Like, did you have to work him 7 days a week?
No, I didn't. I would give him Sunday off. Most of the time, the twice a day, he dictated how much work he needed. As I asked him to do several different maneuvers, several different signals, his ability to either accept those or deny those led me over time to figure out how much more I needed to try to play with him, and that I tried to keep it that way. I didn't want to get into any type of an argument with a stallion if I could help it. And so a lot of times I was a lot more able to deal with him if the edge was taken off and he was a little more tired, right, for a better way of putting it.
As he continued to mature, when did you know he had the potential to be world grand champion?
Oh, when I got him back, well, I of course had broke a lot of colts at that time, and that colt didn't feel like anything that I'd ever had under me ever in my life. And so when I was fortunate enough to have him come back to me as a 3-year-old, over that winter of his 3-year-old year coming into his 4-year-old year, I felt like that was the caliber of horse that could not easily, but that would be justifiable shown in that particular class. My grandfather and his brother had won 12 gaited stakes, so you did not walk around thinking about winning a gaited stake. It had already been done in that family quite a bit, so even if you dreamed of it, you just sort of kept that to yourself.
Mm-hmm. Talking about that class, in 1982, you and Skywatch hit the green shavings for the 5-gaited World's Grand Championship, and waiting for you are Don Harrison Imperator, Red Crabtree and French Wine, Mike Brandon and Lakeview's Rare Spirit, Nelson Green and Valley Venture, George Knight and The Rose. You were 29 years old. Was it intimidating warming up for that class, seeing that group who all had their sights on you?
No. It was intimidating, but for a different reason than what you state. Those are all wonderful horses, but I had been completely consumed in that first year. This horse had, during Lexington, although we weren't there, but in the week of Lexington, that horse, the stud pulled a stifle. When he pulled the stifle, we sent for the veterinarians, and they did what they were supposed to do. And, I had to hand walk that horse. And to make a long story short, I had not been on that horse since the first week of July. So I shipped in for the stud stake, and I still haven't been on his back yet. Now I had done all my due diligence with my groundwork, and then I was able to. They would let me jog him slowly. Excuse me. They would let me jog him slowly, but I was not. I was not advised to get on his back. So as I got on, even for the stud stake, I hadn't been on him in 6 weeks, and so it probably canceled all your nerves because your concern is for your horse and is he okay, and you don't want to hurt him. He's the nicest thing you've ever done, and then you're dealing with this. So it probably helped me with my jitters simply because I stayed more tuned into how does he feel? Is he okay? Is he not limping? Is he up for this? Have I not done anything to hurt him?
Right. Well, Bill Carrington, when he interviewed you after you won the class, he had asked you or said to you, you know, there was some question whether or not he'd come out of the stallion stake sound or not, and you had said that you felt that it wouldn't hurt to try him tonight. Because I've got the video, I've watched it a number of times.
Sure.
So
that was,
yeah,
was kind of it. We showed him in a stud stake, and then they didn't want me to ride him anymore. And I finally, so I didn't. I jogged him and did the best I could. And then I had two very trusted friends of mine in the chute watching me warm up, and I said, you know, I need to try to cut him loose a little bit here before we go in here. You got to tell me if you see anything that's not quite right, because I am not going to hurt him at any cost, including for this class. And so we spent more of our energy making sure that he was okay and he looked like he was fit. And so then we just went in, and we weren't really prepared for that deafening type of noise and what we got into. But the longer I went into that class, the stronger he got, and the more confident I got with I'm not hurting him, and he is up for this, and we better lay it out here and plead our case to the court. So that's what we set our minds to try to get done that night.
well, after a 2-horse workout with Don Harris and Imperator, you became the youngest trainer in history to win the 5-gaited championship at 29, 1 month younger than Lee Shipman, who won it in 1959 with Plainview's Julia. Did he come to you after the class?
Oh, yeah. He was about the first or second guy that was back to the barn and said, you just dethroned me, and I didn't have any idea what he was talking about. And he told me, and I said, I had no idea. I hadn't even thought about that. But I said, I'm obviously keeping very good company, and thank you for telling me. I had no idea.
And you said earlier, Lee Shipman actually worked for your grandfather.
He certainly did. Yes, sir. So it meant a lot because he watched me grow up. So I think if he thought he was going to lose the title, he was more than happy for it to be family in the horse business, at least.
So the Skywatch Imperator rivalry is obviously legendary. Pat McConnell said that it was the best thing to happen to the saddlebred business. During those years, were you and Don Harris friendly outside of the ring, or was there some tension with you guys being such bitter, well, not bitter rivals, I shouldn't say that, being rivals?
Not there. We have been respectful toward one another from the get-go. We were respectful toward one another before this. And having those two horses didn't really change anything. He granted magazine interviews, and I didn't. So I read them and put them on my refrigerator door, and it gave me a better reason to get up 30 minutes earlier than before. But he was always respectful. We always have had a very good, I think, rapport with one another, even to this day. We've participated in several things with the Imperator Skywatch type matchup with autographs and different things like that. And I've always felt like he has been very comfortable, and I have always made sure that I appreciate him. And I certainly hope by now he understands that I'm one of the biggest fans of that horse that he had, period. That it was a great joy to watch him. And I got to watch him a lot through the summer because I was adamant that those two weren't going to meet until we got to Louisville. So when we went to Phoenix or we went to Devon, he went to Rock Creek and Lexington. And I made dadgum sure that I watched him every time he came out of there. And I had different reasons for wanting to watch and trying to figure out where if there is a chink, where is it? And it was that horse. It was really hard. There wasn't a chink. You just kept looking for a weakness. There wasn't a weakness. That horse was a phenomenal horse. And to show against him, if you thought about it, you probably would have psyched yourself out. because that man has made so many flawless passes with that horse that I still can see in my mind that it was quite an honor to be able to be in the ring with him. And one of the things that I would have liked to have changed, I would have loved to have seen those two on the rail myself, just for comparison. And that's the only thing I didn't get out of it. So
Right.
we still have a very, I still quite enjoy when I see him, and I don't think it ever changed
Yeah.
our relationship. He just high caliber person.
Well, video doesn't do it justice, obviously,
No.
and regrettably, I was not around back in those days. I have the videotapes, and they're wonderful. I can't imagine what it'd be like to be, railside for back in those days. You actually answered a question that I have written down here. I had written down, was Louisville the only time that the two horses went head to head, and you answered that.
Yes.
Never Lexington, Rock Creek, Kansas City, anywhere else. The horses never did match up.
No, sir. No, sir. Just where it counted.
Amazing.
So
Amazing.
He'd go to Madison Square Garden, and I went to Kansas City. There was the show circuit was so strong that you could go to these other shows, and I had people that were calling me saying, "Now, if you're going to this horse show, I'm making flight reservations. You got to promise to show up. You're not going to end up not showing that horse after I hear you're going." And it was difficult as you tried to tell everybody, "No, we'll be there, and I promise we're going to show the horse." And he had started quite a following, and it was. I appreciated every day of it. I'd been around my grandfather and watched him chase gaited horses for the rest of his life, and so I was like, you need to appreciate every day of this, because it won't last nearly long enough, but you sure better enjoy the days you have with him.
I've talked to several people who were lucky enough to be in Freedom Hall for those epic battles with Don and Imperator. Doug Shiflett said to me 2 weeks ago during my interview with him that it was absolutely deafening in center ring. Was it hard to keep Skywatch focused through all that noise?
He, fortunately for me, was not. I'm not aware of anything that horse was afraid of, and so the only problem was if I'd needed to say whoa, or if I'd have needed to have clucked, it wouldn't have happened that night. I have been in several sold out arenas, and I've sat on one side or the other, and I've heard the other side make a lot of noise, but I have never until that evening ever been in center court and heard both sides competing at the same time. It was deafening. The horse couldn't hear anything. And so you're doing the best you can, but it's almost like working in silence. It's so loud that now you're working in silence. And so you're communicating with your horse just by feel alone. There's nothing that he can't hear anything. You cannot hear yourself think. So you're in automatic mode. Quite a thing to be a part of.
And Freedom Hall back then in the early 80s actually had more seating than it does now. It was set up differently, and every seat was sold out, standing room only, 10 deep on the rail. Incredible. Everyone who's lucky enough to see Skywatch show all have their own memories of him, and many of those memories revolve around how powerful he trotted and racked. In an article I read about Skywatch, Jim Kohler talked about judging him at Louisville. He said, "Standing there up close to Skywatch, I thought the stud was going to throw his shoulders out of the sockets." You told me a story on the phone when we first contacted back in January about that year that Jim Kohler judged. Tell people that story. I loved it.
Well, Jim had worked there at the farm and had been there, and I greatly admired Jim Kohler, and I was at the perfect age to be the recipient of careful attention that he did give me, and he didn't have to do any of that with me. So I kept up with him, and I had a lot of fun watching him as he progressed in his career. And I was showing Skywatch that night, and I came out of the corner, and Jim was standing off the rail, and he was the first person to meet as you came off that corner. As I came out of there, I looked up across there and saw him, and we traded eyes. And my horse, I thought he really enjoyed this if I'd literally buzz him. And so I started right down for him and then veered just enough, and I could have kicked his card out of his hands with my stirrup. He stood his ground, but he could see that I'm still looking at him. I'm not looking where I'm going. I'm looking at Jim Kohler. He's still looking at me, and I go by, and I could have kicked a cart out of there. And I thought, he'll appreciate this horse, and he'll appreciate that. But if I'd have lugged him over, the horse would have run him over, because the horse was not afraid of any man on the ground. He would have run right over anything. But I knew Jim would appreciate the control at that speed like that, and I just buzzed him once, and we had a long conversation about that later, and it was a lot of fun to share that with him. And back in another reference to family in the horse business.
This is great. This is what makes this interview session for me so special, the stories like that, just incredible. And you told me that Jim expressed the power that it felt like when that horse went by him.
Well, he had said that he could actually, he said, I thought at first it was my heart, but it really was the ground around me that was shaking right before you got there. I could feel the shock waves through the ground as you approached me and then went by. And he said, I've never quite had that happen. And he says, that I don't know how long it'll be before I forget that as well. So this was all done because we never quit locking eyes with one another, because it would have looked like I was headed straight for him. But right. It was a lot of fun, and it just worked out. And I'm still happy and thankful to be able to share that with him that one evening, just for that one brief moment.
So even, like I've said earlier, you don't really get the true picture when you see videos, but even watching the videos of that horse, Skywatch looked like he would get bigger and bigger as the class would go on. And by the time the workout hit, he looked like he was about 18 hands tall. How big was he?
15.2. Hard to believe.
Amazing.
15.2. Very.
How big is a 5-gated pony? What's the pony like?
Well, you know, you're 14.2 for ponies. So you're, yeah. I mean, a few years before that, they had walk trot divisions that were under 15 hands, and then 15. So they had 3 divisions, and this horse was right in the. He wasn't even the biggest of the walk trot horses that they had showed before that. So he was. I think the reason that he seemed like he was taller than that is that we remember seeing him mostly in the air and not much flat-footed on the ground.
Right.
Because he launched himself so high in the air with his motion that he really did seem to be bigger than life.
Was it nerve-wracking having a horse like that? Like, did you just want to bubble wrap his stall, or did you handle him like every other horse that you had?
Well, it was a little nerve-wracking because he was a horse that had a lot of personality, and he would even want to chew himself. So I had 2 steel rods made, and they looked like long lines as they attached to his halter and his tail set. And in the morning, now these things were as large as your finger. They're the diameter of your index finger. In the morning, they would be bent like spaghetti, and we would be going to find an anvil and a sledgehammer and try to bend them back. And in the next morning, one or both would be bent again, as this horse was that strong. I cannot believe that he could bend them like that, but he bent them on a regular basis. So it was, I would have liked to bubble wrap him, but I'm not real sure what kind of bubble it would have taken. It was all we could do to keep him in the stall.
So you were not afraid to travel with him, obviously. There's pictures of you showing him at Devon, and Devon is a 10-hour van ride from Danville, Kentucky. Considering how hard he worked, was it difficult to keep him sound?
It was difficult to keep him sound because of not so much the shipping, but because of, I think, the fact that he made such use of his legs that he constantly was fighting inflammation in his tendon sheaths. So I was always having filling in legs. And when I backed off to rest the legs, then the brain went to pot. And all of a sudden now, just a few days later, I basically have a horse that I'm having a hard time taking any instruction from me. So it was you would easily develop a few ulcers if you thought about trying to ride him without keeping him kind of worked down to where he actually could pay attention to what you were asking him to do.
When you would show him in the qualifying classes, did you try and hold him back a little bit, or could he even relax when he was in the show ring?
Well, I did try to hold him back just a little bit because I knew I needed to save a little bit, but he some nights I went in there to just sort of cruise right through that thing, and sometimes that worked, and sometimes we weren't cruising because he wasn't comfortable cruising, so I would have to let it out a little bit. But he was a horse that I had a bit that I showed him in on Saturday night that he never got to taste until the next time that I needed him on a Saturday night, even at another show. So I always qualified him with a separate bridle, and those would have been there was about 4 of those bridles that might work. If I worked him in a regular bridle for more than a few times at a time, that horse would figure out how that bridle worked and how he could make it work better for him. So I had to keep rotating bridles. And then I had a bit that means more to me than any piece of equipment that I've got, that was a gift from Dale Milligan, who worked for my grandfather's brother, Frank Bradshaw. And he had walked over and given me a bit that he had bought, had gone to his shop. He had he had taken that thing and had bent the mouthpiece into a half moon shape. He'd wrapped it in copper. He came over and told me that he was totally convinced that this bit was the key to showing a nice horse, and that, by golly, he must not have had a nice horse in the barn, or his hands had quit and had failed him after all that work. He said, I really believe in this bit, but I swear to goodness, I sure don't know. I must have lost the instructions because it's sure not working for me. And I took it as a gift, and by George, that bit has won 2 walk trot stakes, 3 gaited stakes, 5 studs, or two different other stakes. So that bit has been something that has been with me, and it's Dale Milligan's bit, and I haven't done anything except try to take the best care in the world of it. So it's interesting.
Well,
And another family in the horse business, another family member of the horse business, that gives you a leg up when they have no idea how crucial it was for me to cross paths with him, and him to make a gift to me from that bit.
no, you should expect a phone call from the Saddle Horse Museum wanting that bit on display when it's all said and done. So now,
well, who knows if anybody will care about it, but it certainly is something that I still get to use occasionally. Now it's more of a schooling bit for the most part, but it means more to me than about any other piece of equipment that I've got. And it means that not so much if I'd bought it, it wouldn't mean, even if it had done that, but the fact that somebody bought it, spent so many man hours on it, tailoring it, and then thought of me. And that's the most touching part of the whole thing, is that it was gifted to me by someone whom I very much respected and had a great relationship with.
Doug Shiflett was very kind to let me use photographs that he's taken of Skywatch to promote this interview tonight. The one over my shoulder back here is obviously your victory pass in '83. I looked at the photo. Skywatch looks like he's shod very light. Was he shod light for you?
Yes, sir. About 10 ounces, counting a heel. We needed to weld a piece across the heel to close the shoe up all the way around to make it solid, because the shoe was bending. We couldn't keep the shoe structure wise. We couldn't keep the shoe from not warping as he would use it. So we put a piece across there, and with that piece, it weighed about 10, 11 ounces. That was it.
Okay.
Went with about a 3 3/4 inch foot.
I bet Hackney ponies carry twice that.
Well, yeah, it just, I'm sure it's what as appropriate for the horse and their talent, but this horse, anything more than that got in his way, hung him up. So that was what we went with, and it was certainly a good choice.
So your time with Skywatch was before everybody and their brother had a video camera. Did you ever have an assistant trainer working for you that you could say, get up on him and ride him so I can see him go?
No, sir. To my recognition, I don't remember letting anybody get on him. And the people that worked for me weren't all that keen on trying. So they watched me struggle to a certain extent, and so I never got anybody that even asked to crawl up on him. it was difficult for, I would say, but I wish I could have shared him with somebody, but the opportunity never did come up.
So
My grandfather never was on him.
your Uncle Frank was never on him either?
No, nobody. I'm the only one that rode him until I lost possession of him. Yes, sir.
The way you speak of him working at home, it doesn't sound like he's the kind of horse that needed to be aired up or entertained a whole lot at home.
No, no. More stimulus simply made it just increased the degree of difficulty in his ability to concentrate on that day for the task at hand.
Would you let him down at the end of the year after you're done showing him at Kansas City? Could you turn him out?
I couldn't turn him out, but I would try to go ahead and start jogging him through the winter until he got to the point where he gets so raunchy jogging that I'd have to crawl back on his back and sort of bring him back in there. He was a stud. He was all stud. And so even he'd get himself in trouble just if you wanted to jog him for 3 weeks at a time, he would get to where he was about half ornery just jogging. So I tried. He just didn't leave me any choice.
Was he breeding mares when he was 5, 6, and 7, or no?
No, hadn't even occurred to us. Oh, the other thing too, though, when you went to Kansas City in November, the A to Z horse show was in February, so there wasn't really an opportunity to do too much because when you got through with that, you're going to go through the holidays and you've got about 60 days, and you're going to ship out to Phoenix and show out to A to Z. So he stayed pretty much on every 3 months he was going somewhere type thing. So we kept him going through most of the year anyway.
Well,
so sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say, you mentioned Phoenix. Jennifer Dixon made a comment here that he was phenomenal in Phoenix. So
yeah, I totally would agree with that. And we were tickled to have him go out there, and I had never been to Phoenix, and it was quite a memorable show that I'm sorry that we lost because it was a great cross section of people from west, east, and all over the place, and it was a lot of fun to show in downtown Phoenix because they showed in the Coliseum where the Phoenix Suns played. So stalls were out on the parking lot, and we went in there, and it was quite a thing to see. And back then, at that time, nobody else was doing things like that. So it was fun to be a part of that.
Next year will mark, not to make you feel old, but next year will mark 40 years since your first World Grand Championship on Skywatch. Does it feel like an eternity, or does it sometimes feel like it was just yesterday for you?
For me, it doesn't feel like it was that long ago. I guess I've stayed busy enough that I haven't had a chance to really think about it that much, but it doesn't seem like it was. I can see how time really, really flies if you're pursuing and trying to find the next whatever. And it keeps you busy and connected and interested. And 40 years is something I hadn't really thought of. And I usually don't watch too many tapes of that horse. When I do sit down and watch it, immediately it clicks into, I remember what that felt like, and I remember what I was trying to do, and we had to compromise on that pass. And that's the way I analyzed the ride again. It's still one of those, yeah, I remember this. I was going to go long and we went short because he decided we're not going long. So it was, I have fun, but it clicks back in when you watch that. I immediately am back in that moment, and I remember what I was trying to do and then what I ended up being able to do. And it worked out for everything, but a lot of those classes wasn't totally by my design. It was a compromise in the fly of the moment, for a better way of putting it.
Well, you had your horse of a lifetime so early in your career, a horse that a lot of people to this day still say is the greatest 5-gated horse of all time. When your time with Skywatch did come to an end, did it make it hard to go to the barn knowing you'd probably never have another one like him?
No, I'm fortunate. I got to watch my grandfather, who had gated horses and that had won at Louisville, and I watched him search for the next one. His brother had gated horses, and I watched him. So I could see that they were going to survive. They're fine. They'd sure like another one if they could figure out how to do it, and they certainly were talented enough to develop another one. But you just keep progressing, and yeah, you're not the person of the hour, but how fortunate are you to have been blessed by this horse touching you in any way, shape, or form. And for a short period of time, we managed not to screw it up, and I'm thankful for that.
Your uncle Frank Bradshaw, of course, trained and showed my to 6 consecutive World Grand Championships from 1963 to 1968. Did you ever get to see her show?
Oh yeah, my grandfather was showing against her, and then we were at the barn, and he would work that mare for my grandfather occasionally. So I was very much aware of her and got to watch her on most of those evenings that she won. Yes, sir.
So your Uncle Frank passed away in 1991, so he did get to see your years with Skywatch. Did the two of you ever debate which of the 2 horses were better? What were his thoughts?
I need to give you a cute story. On the night that Lee Shipman had come down and said, you're now the youngest trainer, it was 5 or 6 people later, from what I would gather, when this mob of people come back to congratulate you. My Uncle Frank pulled me to the side and he said, "You've broken a tie." And I said, "I'm not aware of a tie. What are we referring to?" And he said, "No, sir." No, he said, the Bradshaws and the Teeters have been tied at 12 for a very long period of time, and you now tonight have broken that tie. And I will spend most of Sunday afternoon on the phone reminding every Teeter I can get a hold of that the tie's now broken. So I quite enjoyed that. And I never asked him much about his mare, out of respect and the fact that I easily knew what and how he thought of her, and I was happy to share my horse with him. And I never did ask him who he thought was better. I was just tickled that he was around since my grandfather was not. I was very fortunate that he was still there and could watch that and enjoy that with me.
If I hear your phone ringing down there, I'll assume it's Martin Teeter calling to talk to you, and I'll let you go.
That'd be fine too. That'd be fine too. That's what happened, and as far as I know, that's where the count is until Martin does something about it. It's a little tough where you can be willing, but it's really hard to have the right horse come across your desk. But those guys were after one another for a long period of time back then.
Well, I think Smith Lilly might be watching this tonight, and I know that Smith and Martin are good buddies. So Smith, you can tell Martin Teeter that the gauntlet has been laid down by Mitch here. It's time for the Teeters to step up here.
Yeah, I'll be the first one to root him on the rail. I hope
so.
For him.
Now, you and I were chit-chatting before we came on live, and I brought up a subject that I didn't intend on bringing into the conversation, but you said it would be okay if we did talk about this. Unfortunately, you have something in common with Tom Galbraith and Gene McLean Davis and Tom Moore. You suffered a fire at your farm back in the 80s. And the horse we just talked about was involved in that fire, so it's kind of scary to think what might have been. Tell me about that fire, and I know you lost a couple of full siblings to Skywatch in that fire. Tell me about that horrible night.
Well, it started, I guess, immediately, and luckily for us, we were able to get 2 gaited horses out of that fire based on the proximity of where they were from the door that was the only one that was available to get a horse out with. And we got out Skywatch, and we got out another gaited horse that we had at the same time, and his name was New York. And although we got those 2 horses out, we were not successful in getting out 2 full sisters to Skywatch that had already shown and had won, and were already on to. There's no telling what they could have possibly produced for the horse registry in the future had that not happened. And we had several very, very, very nice horses that were young, that were being developed, and some of them had already been started on their show career. And when you get wiped out, I mean, I didn't even have a groove brush when I was done. I just completely shot all the way, and that's what led me then out to California. I had to find a way to pay for my farm, and I had no income, and I didn't have any prospects. So the best thing I could do was go west, and that's what led us out there.
And you said that was 1983 that happened to you?
I think that was 83 coming into 84. Yes, sir.
See, I was always,
Yes, sir.
yeah, I never knew the story. I was just under the impression that your Skywatch years, you were in Danville the whole time. I didn't realize that you were out at the coast that soon. So
I was still in Danville, and I probably went to California in 85. So that horse had already shown in his third year, and then the natural progression, it just seemed like the most sensible thing to do was to go west. And so that's what I ended up doing, because I was trying my best to try to figure out how to pay off some debt and to keep my farm. And the best way to do that was an offer that I couldn't refuse. So I went west.
I said off the top of the interview, my biggest fear is that we would spend 2 hours talking about one horse, and we're 1 hour into this and we've talked about one horse. But I'll tell you what, I got one. I mean, hey, listen, I could talk to you for a month about Skywatch and not get tired, but I have one more question about him before we move on.
Sure.
One last question about Skywatch. Which of these statements would be the most accurate? Mitch Clark made Skywatch, Skywatch made Mitch Clark, or Mitch Clark and Skywatch made each other?
Oh no, I would say that the second one would be it. I'll give the horse the credit. I was just lucky enough not to get in his way, but that horse, I don't know that I could take any credit for teaching him. I was just fortunate enough to figure out a way to make the work endurable enough for him to go ahead and keep trying. He was a very, very game horse, and I was just lucky enough to get along with him. But I'll take that was a phenomenal horse, and there's just no way for me to take too much credit in something that I did. I just tried my best to stay out of his way so that he could do what he learned how to do. I hope that answers that question.
I'm not surprised at that answer at all. I mean, any good horseman will tell you that they're only as good as the horses they have, and they do give the credit to the horses. So next up on my list of questions actually was to talk about your California years, and you've already answered the question of when you moved out there. It must have been a major culture shock for you to move from the hotbed of the saddlebred world of Danville, Kentucky to Rancho Santa Fe, California. What was the transition like for you? What was the transition like to make?
Well, excuse me. It quite different. The first thing that I found quickly was that the shows are a lot further apart, and that a short haul out there might possibly be to Phoenix, and that might be some 400 miles. And living in Kentucky, a long haul for us was about 75 miles. So it was a pretty interesting thing, as people didn't think anything of traveling the whole up and down the whole West Coast to put on a horse show, and they needed each other, and they worked together to make that happen. And it was the first time that I could see why people out there were justified in owning large trucks. They needed to own their own large truck and to put it on the road, because there weren't any short hauls. Everything was a long haul away, and you learn how to go through LA at 2 in the morning so that the truck doesn't have to stop. And what time do you have to leave San Diego to hit LA at 2 in the morning and keep right on going? And it didn't have a lot to do with what I'd rather do. It was what you had to do to make the whole thing work. And I didn't, up until that time, I don't think that I had ever had more than 3 horses a show in a session. And later in time out there, I remember helping Michelle one time, and I had 17 in one session. And by golly, we got them all out in there, and I had no idea you could do that. And it was probably the best thing that could have happened to me, because after that, with multiple horses to show, I don't even give it a thought, because I'm going, whatever it is, it's less than 17, so I'm sure we can handle it.
Were you concerned at all that it would be hard to campaign a horse on the West Coast?
Actually, no. Fortunately for me, I was able to go out there when I was the benefactor of some great timing. Michelle McFarland had a wonderful group of horses there at that time. Rob Tanner also had a phenomenal string of horses there at that time. There were a lot of high quality, fabulous show horses that were on the West Coast at that time. And they backed that up with their ability to take those horses back to Louisville and make a full accounting of themselves. And it was kind of fun being in California and progressing, readying your horse to go back east, and to know that you're going to be drop shipped in there with an element of surprise, because at that time people could not, they were, for the most part, hadn't seen your horse yet. So you're getting to fly in there right on the weekend before the show starts, and people really haven't seen. They've heard about a horse, but they haven't really seen him. Video was just getting started,
right.
So it wasn't really traded. It wasn't that easy to do. No one was filming horse shows, and so we enjoyed the element of surprise, and sometimes it really paid off.
Well, we'll get to one of those elements of surprise here shortly. So when you would tip in from California to Louisville, did you fly the horses or did you van them in?
No, we flew them in. We flew them in. It took you left Ontario Airport, and you left that night, and they loaded about 4 o'clock in the morning out there, and they landed a little bit before 11 in Louisville, and then we had a van that just brought them across the street to Kentucky State Fair, and we had all the stalls set up, and we walked them right in there, and they're flagging themselves, and they were not the benefactors of the humidity, so it took about a week for them to for the edge to get off, and so we also shipped horses that were coming in from a cooler climate, and we were fortunate that the heat didn't hurt us too much. And my horses I was legged up pretty good, so they were kind of ready for this. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, no, it's okay. You'd fly in a week ahead of time to give them a chance to acclimatize?
No. We would fly in the day or two before the show started.
Okay, right.
The weekend if it started back then, the show started on Monday, so we flew in on Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning, and 2 days later the show starts. So they didn't have Sundays, they had Monday evenings at that time, and so it started on Monday evening, and then later of course that show kept growing, and then now there's classes all over. But about 48 hours before the show started, we flew in, and we were game on.
So I just going to switch gears a little bit here for a second. 1987, with your 5-gated championship still fresh in everyone's minds, you head to the Morgan Grand Nationals with Legacy's Viking. Okay. And when it's all over, you take the Spotlight Victory Pass with him in the Morgan Park Saddle World Grand Championship. Tell us about how that came about.
Well, it was my first time. I'd never had any Morgans. And so when I met Elizabeth Goth and her mother, Bettina Bancroft, they had a string of Morgans and were interested in keeping a string of Morgans along with a few Saddlebreds is how it started out. And so I got to appreciate a lot of Morgan trainers and Morgan owners and got to quite enjoy that. And so when I went into Oklahoma the first time, I was tickled to be there because I'd heard a lot about that show, but I'd never been able to attend. And so it was fun to be there. And once again, I had an unruly stallion that I was trying to figure out how to hold together and try to put on a pretty good show. And it worked out really well for us. And so first time we went there, we won the Open Park Stake, and we won some other classes, but that was the one that I had hoped would go well and had no idea how that would turn out. And we were very lucky. But it was a wonderful show. I still remember walking in. It was a great place to show a horse.
So your first time ever to Oklahoma, you win the Park Saddle Stake class.
Yes, sir. I knew it was going to be downhill after that, but I went on ahead and we kept going. It was going to be hard to. We came back the next year for that horse and bought hay that next year and had got that horse ready. But I purchased alfalfa hay out there while I was there, and I did not have any idea until this horse became deathly ill in a matter of hours after the hay was delivered. I had found out that there is a small insect called a blister beetle, and it was rapidly on its way to killing my Open Park horse. And had I not had a very astute vet that was from Oklahoma that knew what he was dealing with, and we shipped him over there, he literally saved that horse's life. Or we would have possibly been able to have duplicated the first year done it again. And we were just lucky the horse survived the whole incident at all, because he looked like he was going to die for the first 48 hours. And the vet didn't give us much hope. So we had a hot and cold kind of reception as far as Oklahoma, and we learned about. I found out something I never knew. I didn't even know there was a blister beetle, but it is totally toxic for horses, and we learned that one very much the hard way.
Jim and Faye Lowry actually did a live Q&A session on Saddle Horse Report. I think it was last week, and I watched it. Jim Lowry, of course, has made his way into the saddlebred industry from the Morgan horse world, and sure. He said during his Q&A that when he made the transition over, he was known as that Morgan horse guy. And he said that really offended him, because he said, I'm just a trainer. I'm not a Morgan horse guy or a saddle horse guy. I'm a trainer. When you rolled into Oklahoma in 1987, were people kind of looking at you like, here comes that hot shot Mitch Clark, that guy that had Skywatch, now trying to bust into our world here?
I think, fortunately, a lot of those people probably didn't know who I was, that didn't hurt anything. I'm sure there was a little bit of that. And then I needed to be able to back up whatever somebody was forming an opinion of me, and it worked out that way. I didn't really get, most of the people that I was dealing with at that time were very nice to me and very inviting, but I think there was a little bit of that attitude, and it would be normal for you to get a little bit of that, I think. But I didn't see myself as, I was just trying to compete and just trying to do the best I could. I didn't have any statement to make, and I had no opinion to offer. I was just glad to be a part of that show, and still fondly remember some quality people that I got a chance to meet while I was a part of that. And those are wonderful people, and I still keep up with a few of them simply because they made quite a mark on me.
Well, I'm going to assume, and I always get myself in trouble whenever I make a statement, so I'm going to say I assume, and Mark Bodner, you're probably watching, and Jay Wood, you're probably watching. If I'm wrong, correct me. But I'm assuming that Mitch Clark is probably the only trainer in history to ever win the Saddlebred 5-gated World Grand Championship and the Morgan Park Saddle World Championship. I could be wrong, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that's probably what's happened. So, Mitch, we're going to switch back over to the Saddlebreds now. My first trip ever to the World Championship Horse Show with my dad was back in 1990. We went down just to watch. When the roses were awarded in the 3-gated Grand Championship, it was a spooky but dainty mare named Cameo's Angel Wings that would be crowned World Grand Champion that night. Her journey to Saturday night success was not a short one for you. 1987, under saddle, she was third in the walk trot stake after a workout with Starina and Stonewall's Crimson and Clover. 1988, she's in harness with you. You take the gate, there's something not right about her. She's not comfortable, so you took the gate in the harness stake in 88. Back in the harness stake in 1989, third behind Foxfire's Prophet and Perfect Prowler, but she leaves the ring with an ovation, a standing ovation. Tell us about Cameo's Angel Wings.
She was a very complicated mare. She was very athletic, but she had some quirks about her that you had to think around and not waste any more time trying to repair, because they were not repairable. It didn't seem like, at least under my tutelage. I had to figure out a way to work around her as best I could instead of changing her mind. So she was complicated. When we showed her as a walk trot mare to success that year, I showed her on the West Coast as a harness horse. And it occurred to me while I was sitting on her under the baseball stadium, getting ready to go across there, that hell, I haven't been on her back in almost a year, and she hadn't cantered in a year. And I sure hope she remembers how to canter tonight, because she hadn't been asked in a year. And these are the silly things that go through your head as you're going across there and hoping that you get this right. Harness wise, the year that we showed her in harness, she won the mare stake, I think, one year there in a qualifying class. I had ridden her all summer out there. And I remember Red Crabtree had judged her at Santa Barbara about 3 weeks before that, and she'd won the walk trot stake. And then we won the harness mare class, and he came back to the barn and he says, "I'd love to know where in the hell this mane came from. I just saw this mare 3 weeks ago." So it was a whole lot of fun, but it was a mare that you had to trick. On the night that you needed her, you needed to switch courses and not give her too much notice, and then you might get lucky and you might slip through there, and something special might happen.
So when did you get her? How old was she, and where did she come from?
I bought her from Bob Vessel, and she was a yearling, and she was green broke to long lines. So she was yearling, and I picked her. Michelle McFarland had said, "Go down and look at her and tell me what you see." And I went down there and I said, looks to me like she's going to be able to really use her legs. And I didn't know how complicated she was going to be, but that was what started that journey. And we started as a long yearling.
I want to say thank you to Jay Wood. He's tuned in here and said, "I believe that Bill is right. Ironically, the first time I met Mitch was in Oklahoma." So it sounds like I might be right about my prediction that you were the gated and park winner. So we'll move on to our next horse. If you were to look up Park Trot in the Saddlebred Dictionary, there should be a photograph of Be Happy, in my opinion. Out of one of the greatest brood mares of all time of history, Denmark's Radiant Society. He's a half-brother to Rejoice, a Sweet Treat, the Radiant Prince, amongst others. A ton of great offspring out of that wonderful mare. Did he come from Carter Cox? Did Carter start him?
No, sir. I bought him at we selected him at Calorama Farm, and we bought him from Larry Hodge. And he was down there as a 3-year-old, and they were riding him. And we went down there, watched him ride him, and I thought, I don't like him under saddle, but I really like the horse. And I thought that I'll never ride him. And I think I might have got on him once after that just to see. And I thought this is what I remember seeing, and this is why I'm not going to ride him. He looked like he would be fun to ride, but he was not the same riding horse as he was a harness horse. And the rest was just pure fun. That horse every day was exactly like you saw in the ring every day. He blew, he snorted, he had fun. You don't get many show horses, period, like him, but every day was a great one for him. He just enjoyed getting out and snorting and doing what you saw him do in the ring. Lots of fun. I won't take much credit for that. That kind of personality is quite a thing. And at that time, Elizabeth showed him all through his 4-year-old year on the West Coast and did a tremendous job putting him over, and he was just fabulous.
Well, under your direct, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Please,
okay.
Please keep going.
Under your direction, Be Happy's impressive career included the 1989 Junior World Championship, the 1990 Reserve Amateur Grand Championship, 1991 third in the Grand Championship, to a standing ovation again, leaving the ring. 1992 World Champion Ladies Fine Harness with Linda Wilford. After winning the ladies class in 1992, Linda Wilford decides that she wants to see Be Happy take another shot at the World Grand Championship. Did you suggest to Linda that he'd be best served to be campaigned in Kentucky to try and pull that? And did you help her make the transition to Arrowhead and Tom Moore?
I didn't. I told her that I understood what she wanted to do, but she needed to make the decision herself. So I give her credit for finding the right place for him to go. And I totally understood what she was doing. And she was a fabulous owner, and I had a whole lot of fun with her. And for her, she had won her class with that horse, and she had gone to the top of the mountain, and she was not even interested in trying to go back on the mountain. She was like, nope. He gave me the one thing I never deserved ever in my life, and I'm indebted to him, and he will die with me. And I feel like I need to give him another shot. And the rest was just us supporting that and hoping the best for the outcome. And what a fabulous thing it turned out to be. But it worked out great. He was a wonderful horse.
You had to get in the ring and show against him with Storm Chaser and M80 a little bit later on in your career. So yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. As mentioned earlier in the interview, you have received a number of standing ovations in Freedom Hall with Skywatch, Cameos, Angel Wings, and Be Happy. Perhaps the loudest standing ovation in history of the World Championship Horse Show came in 1992 in the three-gated Grand Championship when Peter Doubleday said over the microphone, "The reserve champion is entry number 1396, Memories Citation."
Yeah, that's probably the longest ovation that I certainly did appreciate the support, and it hurt, still hurts today. The horse deserved his just rewards, and they didn't see it that way. But I know what I felt, and I certainly wouldn't have changed the pass of it. I owe that horse an awful lot.
Well, one of the three saw it that way. Unfortunately, two didn't. How the panel did not send Memory Citation and one for the road back on the rail for a workout in that class is still a head scratcher. I mean, it was just, that class was begging for a workout, especially since you had a workout in the 3-year-old class earlier in the week with George Knight and All Talk. I'm assuming that they probably put you back on the rail with George just to see the horse again, assuming that he's 3 and he won't be shown back again on Saturday night. When you're called for the reserve championship, the building absolutely erupts. It's the loudest ovation I can ever remember hearing in Freedom Hall. Memory Citation, another superstar from Davison McFarlane. How old was Memory Citation when you got him?
He was 2 and had not been shown yet. Interestingly enough, Virgil Helm had raised him, and Virgil had him at the Kentucky State Fair. And I'm sitting in a skybox with Michelle McFarlane, and Virgil's working this colt after the show one evening. We watch him make one trip around there, and she's immediately sending me down to find out what does it take. We like this horse, and let's get on with it. While I'm climbing the steps and the chairs, John Canasher has stopped Virgil and asked the same question. And Virgil says, this is what it'll cost. And the first come, first serve. And John said, that's just the way I saw it too. Whips out a checkbook and starts writing him out a check right there on the spot. I couldn't do that. All I could do was find out what was going on. So then I asked John, well, now what's it cost now? And I did help him double his money. By the end of the week, I was able to buy the horse. And John did own him for the week of Louisville. And to his credit, when that horse showed as a 3-year-old, and I had a fabulous ride as a 3-year-old, the person making the most noise on the rail was John Canasser. And I give him a lot of credit for being that happy that that horse was that successful. And he'd made him some money, but it was a nifty horse. And he was, I was just tickled to death because he was high-fiving everybody out down there, and he probably maybe even had some money on him. But the horse did him well, and I was just tickled to death that he saw it that way and that he was glad that that horse was successful. And we would have never had him had John decided not to sell him. So it's funny how things have to click and fall into place, and people do things that you end up being the total beneficiary of, and that was one of them.
You mentioned earlier about one of the benefits of being out on the West Coast and video not being really prevalent back in those days. You could fly into Louisville and kind of surprise everybody. And there's a classic example. You did show him once out in California before you made the trip to Kentucky. I remember seeing the photograph in Saddle Horse Report. Was word getting out that Mitch Clark has a freak 3-year-old that's heading to Louisville? And did you know early in the year that you'd be showing him back on Saturday night? Was that always the plan?
No, that's never it's never the plan. We showed him at Del Mar, and he was a handful. Del Mar at that time was an outdoor ring, and so you're so close to the coast that he was a handful, and we were able to sort of keep him going, but he was pretty rough around the edges, and it worked itself out. That's a class that was in June, so we still had some time to play with him. The decision to try to go for the gated stake as a 3-year-old was something that you entertain after you get to Louisville. You've ascertained what it felt like in the first class and what he still feels like, and you know him well enough to know, is he up for another class? And I think we go back to the fact that he had a second workout in his 3-year-old class, had already demonstrated to those judges especially the two that we will leave nameless, they already knew that horse would go back on the rail and kick your freaking butt. And so to not have that happen, because this horse has already proved that he'll go do that, we'll lock him out and give him a red ribbon and send him home. So that's why they didn't have a workout. They'd already had one earlier in the week, and the horse had proven himself, and he would have done the same thing that night. And so the crowd lost out on that one, but these are the things that happen. But I was certainly appreciative of all the noise, and I think that's probably what happened and why.
I'm sure by now you've seen some of the videos I've posted on YouTube. I was fortunate to get to videotape Memory Citation when he was 4 and actually won the championship. He won the junior over 2 class. Liz Kinney commented on one of the videos I posted of Citation, and she said, and I quote, "Very few horses use their shoulders like that, and even fewer trainers are capable of asking a horse to do that." So I think that was a great compliment for you.
Sure. No, and Liz Kinney's seen an awful lot of nice horses, so it means an awful lot to me because it's not an empty statement coming from her, and I certainly appreciate that and will thank her for that.
And ironically, Liz Kinney showed One for the Road as a 4-year-old for Dr. Ron.
She certainly did. She certainly did. But he was and listen, I loved that horse. He was a nice horse. But if you're going to put those two together on that evening, that was my bone of contention. On a given night, I felt like we had the better horse that night. But that other horse was a high quality horse and got a show career that proves it. And Liz did a wonderful job for Doc at that time, and I'm sure she was appreciative of being able to ride such a nice horse back then too. And that was totally a memorable junior walk trot class.
I've got the videotape of 1992 when Randy got ahead of you in that championship. I've probably watched it so much, I'm surprised the tape still hasn't disintegrated. If I've watched it once, I've watched it 200 times. And if people out there have not seen it, subscribe to Richfield Video Archives, talk to R.H. Bennett, get to watch that class. When they call for the line, well, first of all, Mitch, you lost your hat and the crowd went nuts. Citation made an incredible pass coming down from the trot, second way of the ring. When they call for the lineup, Randy Harper rides down and almost pins you into the in-gate, challenging you to ride away with One for the Road, kind of a, let's go at it here and see what happens. And the crowd goes absolutely nuts. How long after that did it take for, there was some heat there. Randy you two were really jawing at each other there, and you lined up right beside each other for the saddle strip. There was some obvious heat there. Did it take a while before you and Randy spoke about that class, or?
It probably took a great long while before we were probably able to. I didn't like how I got treated on a young horse that night, and so it was all I could do to not act out and to not do anything or to say anything that I might be sorry for later. And so I felt like all we needed to do was show apart from one another and let our horses speak for themselves. And he was probably under an awful lot of pressure, and he did something I wouldn't have done. I'll say that. But at any rate, we have a good we have a good rapport with one another. And I sold him a horse a couple of years ago, and they did extremely well with him, and we get along. So it's kind of one of those things where you let things go and you move on. And when I run into him, there is no recollection, and there's no that doesn't even come to my mind anymore. That was a time from a long time ago and doesn't have anything to do with today and enjoying his company today.
Aside from that situation, I mean, that class, that's what showing horses is all about.
Oh, sure.
To me, that was, yeah.
That's the kind of you as a young trainer, you watch and witness things similar to that, and you will yourself that one day would I be lucky enough to be part of that. And then when both horses cooperate and they're both extremely good, then the spectators are stimulated to the nth degree, and it ends up being the class not to be missed. And I've just been lucky enough to had that happen a couple of times, and it's been an awful lot of fun. And some people actually think you're an entertainer when it's all said and done, and it's actually not you. It's the horse you're showing, and they make you one more time again over. And we can't do this without these special horses that take it to another level, and they're few and far between, but they certainly are appreciated when you're able to watch them.
I think a lot of people felt that One for the Road and Memory Citation was going to be the next great saddlebred rivalry. Sadly, the Wheelers and Randy Harper lost One for the Road not long after Louisville that year. Aside from your obvious sympathy for the Wheelers and the Harpers, were you disappointed that you wouldn't get a rematch between the two horses?
Well, I didn't feel like I needed a rematch. I thought that had already been worked out, and everybody kind of knew who had won that time anyway. But anytime this industry loses a horse of that caliber, we're not able to replace that type of horse. And I had known the Wheelers most of my life, and they have been nothing but the friendliest and respectful to me since I've been quite young and very interested in their horses, their thoroughbred horses at Devon. There's so many facets of that family and expertise. Kenny Wheeler has won so many hunter confirmation classes that it would stagger the mind how well he does what he does. And that's a side that if you just go to saddlebred shows, you'll have no idea of the eye he has and the ability he has to try to do that. So sadly, for them to lose a horse of that caliber, you stay sad, not in a selfish sense, except that anybody that loses a horse that's at the top of their game like that, it's difficult because now our division has been sadly weakened, and there's not one to step up that is anything closely or remotely as talented or slick as that horse is. And so we then are in the role of waiting again for special horses again. And as we all know, those are not that easy to come by, and some waits are much longer than we want them to be.
It was a devastating year for the Wheelers. Of course, they lost Mark of Success, that wonderful pony that same can't imagine. So, it's unfortunate. The loss of One for the Road, especially sad, because that would have sold out Freedom Hall year after year. That would have been a very easily marketable class. It would have been like watch and pair all over again.
They were the top form of the walk trot classes, and they were like that other comparison. They were similar and yet different. They brought different characteristics, and they both were quality horses. And so you were right if you liked one, and you were right if you liked the other one. But you had to be there, especially in those times. You had to be there because you couldn't get hooked up. And even if you're hooked up today, it's not like being on the ring and watching that live. But to see those two horses lock horns and to go around the ring, you're watching the top part of the pinnacle, and you better pinch yourself because it's going to be a while before you get two of them. A lot of times we have a really nice horse that ends up being a clear, distinctive winner. But when there's two and they're challenging each other, it's a special event, and it is something that people really enjoy because you can be right in choosing either horse. They're both such quality horses. So I agree with you, and I think that would have been a lot of fun. And another thing that life just didn't let get worked out, but it certainly we selfishly would have liked to have seen them go at it again. Well, it would have been fun.
There were a few trainers. That was a good class that year. There were probably a few trainers in there that probably hoped you and Randy would get fixated on each other and maybe make a mistake, because Tom Moore on Perfect Prowler and Jack Nevitt on the Groomsman were nice quality horses too.
Absolutely, and had won several. They'd won a lot of their classes on their way to that summer of getting there to qualify. And I even tried to buy Groomsman later down the road. So I loved that horse from when he was young, when I was first made aware of him as well. So yeah, we had good company. We were just lucky enough to have something that was just a little bit extra, and they were both on their game at the same time, and it makes it fun as a spectator because it's a double treat when you get to watch two of them that both could win. So stay tuned, because one of them is going to have to be the winner, but both are are easily talented enough to wear that crown.
You didn't show memory citation at all after that class until the following year at Louisville. Is there any reason why you let him down and didn't show him for an entire year?
Well, he was just sore, and so we decided we would let him down and let him have some time off. He had worked really hard from his 3-year year and his 4-year year. That horse had produced an awful lot, and it still took a little bit of time to train him down to get where you were going. He had a very strong personality as well, and we didn't have anything else to really offer at that time. We knew that the thing to try to do was to come back slowly, and to try to be ready when we needed to be, and that was our point of attack, and we felt like that was in the horse's best interest anyway.
1993, and you and I talked about this when I sat at your tack room a couple of years ago in Louisville when we met. 1993 was the first year that my dad and I actually made a trip to Louisville with a pony, and our excitement of showing at Louisville was incredible. But for me, almost as equally exciting was knowing that I was going to get to see memory citation coming back as a 4-year-old, and it just made that week was incredible and something I'll never ever forget. And what a just I'd like to say that I got to see him live since I was on the rail, and I was standing literally right beside Craig Clapp, who is a little bit loud at times.
Yes, yes.
But I saw the class through a 1-inch by 1-inch black and white viewfinder because I videotaped it with my old Hitachi video camera, but I don't regret having it because it's probably the greatest video I've ever shot, and it's the first one I ever uploaded to YouTube, and it's got 20,000 or 25,000 views or something, and just wonderful comments about memory citation. So again, a horse you and I could talk about for probably another week, but we're going to keep on moving. So sure. Garland's Dream wins the 1994 ASHA National 5-gated Futurity with you in the saddle. I'm sure that a lot of people assume that because of the way she was named that you named her in honor of your grandfather, Garland Bradshaw, but in reality, she was sired by Harlem Globetrotter out of a mare named Rose Garland. Where did you get her, and when did you get her?
We bought her from the Calorama production sale, and we bought her as a yearling. And we had bought 3 or 4 horses in that group. As best I remember, we bought 3 or 4 horses that afternoon, or that during the course of that day. And Garland's Dream was one of the designated horses that I wanted to go home with. Even as a yearling, I felt like I'd known the mare that David Rudder had shown, and her dam, and I'd always liked her, and David always had some good goes with her, and we felt like she would complement what we were trying to do, and that it certainly worked out. A lot of.
So she.
Go ahead.
Sorry. So after you win that class with her, she gets sold to Fox Grape Farm, and Larry Hodge takes over the training duties of her. She'd go on to win the Junior 5-gated mare class the following year, Reserve World's Grand Champion Junior 5-gated, behind the Red Ferrari and Karen Folkers. She knocked on the door in '86 and '87 in the Grand Championship, making the workout berth both years. And then in 1998 and '99, she wins the 5-gated World's Grand Championship for Larry Hodge. Obviously, you were happy for Larry and the owners, but did a part of you kind of wish you'd kept her so you could have been in the saddle for those World Grand Championships with her?
Well, yeah, because I was told that she was sold. I wasn't even part of that transaction. That was at that time my wife and Larry had gotten together, and they decided to sell her. And I would not have ever recommended selling her, and I knew that at a 3-year-old. And I'd been down that road and felt like that mare also had that capability of putting the class together in the gated stake, and I felt like they hadn't won that yet, and I felt like that mare was capable of doing that. So they sold her, but they didn't ask me first, and so I didn't play a role in. I think that's a good idea to sell her and take the money and run, because I felt like she was irreplaceable. And but I was at that time. This is how things work, and I was tickled to death that the mare did prove us right, and that farm bred a quality mare, and she certainly did a wonderful job and made a good account, and Larry did a good job with her. And so it was fun watching her, and it was fun to have had a small role in her development before you get to watch what the final result was, and just tickled to be a part of that history.
And later on in life, when her show career was over, paired with Undulata's Nutcracker, produces Don O'Neill, Saturday Night World Grand Champion, three-gated horse with Chris Reiser. So great mare, great mare.
They had several horses. That mare produced several of those horses, and they all were tremendous athletes like she was. So it was not a surprise that she would have been capable of producing that kind of horse. Everybody did a nice job with it, and it was fun being a part of that.
M80, 1993 Junior Fine Harness Stallion and Gelding, and World's Grand Champion Junior Fine Harness unanimous. Talk to us about M80.
We flew back to Kentucky from California and bought him from George Knight as a 3-year-old, and bought him at his farm, and brought him out, and didn't get to show him as a 3-year-old because I had back surgery, and that horse, I was down for back surgery and couldn't pull that together, and so I had to wait an extra year before we could bring him back, and so we showed him as a 4-year-old.
Now,
wonderful horse.
When you were interviewed at Louisville, when you showed him, I believe when he was 5 years old, and you had to show him against Be Happy and Roseland's Secret Rhythm, they interviewed actually all three of you, Mike Barlow, Tom Moore, and yourself, before the Fine Harness Grand Championship. And one thing you mentioned in that interview I picked up on is you said that he still wore his gated shoes. He was shod lightly, so he was gated.
Yes. Yeah, I showed him as a gated horse on the West Coast when we first started. I showed him as a gated horse and just didn't feel like I had the speed that I needed when I gated him to develop a mouth that I felt like I needed for him to get the motion that I kind of wanted to get out of him. And so I gated him to try to help that along in his mouth, and his motion came through that. And we did leave the gated shoes on him. He really didn't need, once he figured out what he was doing, he knew how to trot, and he didn't need any weight to do that. And so it made him, we had a lot of fun with him, a lot of fun.
So the 1994 Fine Harness Grand Championship, anything but a cheap class. Be Happy, Roseland's Secret Rhythm, Mystical Mood with George Knight, yourself with M80, Sam Brannon with Magical Moonlight. You get the yellow ribbon for fourth, and yet another Mitch Clark standing ovation on the way out of the ring. Incredible. Love that horse.
Wonderful horse. Getting a little tired of standing ovations on Saturday night, but it's somebody's got to have them. So I guess that ends up being me. But that horse made a very good account of himself, and you're right. In a group of horses like that, it was just a great quality harness class, and it was fun to be a part of that. And you always hope you do better. But I felt like the horse made an awfully good count of himself.
For sure. Skywatch did produce some nice horses when his breeding career started. Probably the most notable would be Stallion Son, Castle Bravo. You showed him in harness a few years before you trimmed him and showed him as a walk trot horse. 1999 world champion, three-gated over 15-2. Third in the three-gated grand championship behind Hollywood Excellence and A Sweet Treat. And then he would go on to win the 1999 American Royal three-gated grand championship. Did you see a lot of traits of him, or of his father in him, that big front end?
Sure. He's probably the closest and only thing that felt like his dad under you. And he's the closest thing that I felt that moved kind of like his dad. Different version. This horse was another. He was 16-2 when his dad was 15-2. But he had that same kind of feel under him. And I started and showed him first as a gated horse in California. He showed in a couple of gated classes before we were trying to figure out what to do with him, and bought him from Calorama. That horse's registered name was called The Franchise, and we bought him from Calorama Farm as a 2-year-old. And then we tried to take him home and try to figure out what to do with him. But once again, Calorama raised a wonderful horse, and we were the beneficiary of him, and I appreciated the horse and the fact that he was way easier to get along with than his dad, and way more cooperative, and an awful lot of fun to ride because he was an athlete too. So you didn't have to force or push or do anything. You just had to get out of his way and let him
Now,
roll. So it was lots of fun.
am I wrong in saying that's him over your right shoulder behind us?
Yes, sir.
So
That's true. Yes, sir.
what it was. Now,
That
you and I could spend a week talking about the great horses that you've had over the years: Skywatch, Cameo's Angel Wings, Iva Jewel, Be Happy, Elegant Stitches, Zeitgeist, Garland's Dream, Sabotage, A Touch Too Much, Callaway's Annie C, A Song in My Heart, Seamer's Executive Suite, Memory Citation, Buck's Fantasy, Storm Chaser, Castle Bravo, M80, Trey Shea, Imperiaptor, Von Obi, Ridgeview's Countdown, who would later go on to be renamed Senior Frog, Hocus Pocus Dominocus, and most recently, Memories in Blue, the 2020 Southern Saddlebred Finale Grand Champion. And actually, Leslie Miles has made a comment here. Appreciate your time, knowledge, and honesty. We have admired you a good long time. We love Memories in Blue. Looking forward to seeing what we need to learn as the season begins. All these wonderful horses that you've had over the years, Mitch, of all the horses that you have trained and sold, which one was the most, made you the most sad to see leave your barn?
Shoot, that would be difficult because usually by the time you get them to the point where people are entertained, you've got a pretty good rapport with that horse, and it is hard to pile up, or it's hard to team up with the next horse. So a lot of those horses with heavy hearts, did they leave the barn? And I've always talked to myself out of most sales simply because it's hard for me to turn that horse loose and then move on to the next one. I know that with God's help, there might be another one, but at the same time, it's awfully hard to turn loose of that one. So it's really hard, and you certainly miss them for a long period of time. I would hate to try to point one over any of the rest of them because they all are voids that you have to fill. But I walk around depressed for several weeks sometimes before I keep walking by an empty stall going, I know you're in there, but you don't have any idea what was in there before you got in there. So you got a lot to live up to as you walk by some of these horses' stalls and reminisce of how blessed I have been, at least over a period of time, to have some nice horses that put me in a very nice light. And I appreciate that.
I have a feeling that your answer to this question might be the horse that we spent the first hour of the interview on. Which one of the horses you've trained over the years gave you the most sleepless nights?
No, it would be that horse, simply because I was fighting injuries. I was hoping that he's okay. And my qualifying rides always led me with no expectation as to what I would get in a stake night ride, because that horse always gave you two complete opposite rides, and you never knew exactly what you were going to get. And so to look forward to the next challenge was you did that with much trepidation, at least for me. And am I up for this moment? Because I really don't know what he's going to throw my way. And that one I walked around with on a daily basis, trying to make sure he was okay and hopeful that I would have something to counter whatever he was doing that he could live with, and we could make it through another class.
Well, we've covered off the Saddlebreds. Our Hackney viewers, and I know there's a lot of them watching right now, would love to hear some stories about the great ponies that you've trained over the years. When did you start training Hackney ponies, Mitch?
Quite late, actually. Leslie Schaefer had called me and had a pony, and she said, I'd like to see what you could do with it. And I was always enjoyed ponies and had enjoyed Gib Marcusi, and enjoyed my first pony ride was with Bill Robinson, and I was 5 years old, and I stood in the basket so that I was not even, he let me stand in the basket just so that I could see what I was going. If I sat in the seat, I was going to sit too high. So I wasn't even in his way then. I've always enjoyed athletes, and ponies are the epitome of athletes. And I don't remember working too many of them where they don't lift your spirits and put you in a better mood. As soon as you hook one of those things and they start whipping their legs around there, I usually have a smile, and it's kind of hard to contain yourself because you spend the rest of your day having horses remotely move something like what these things do without even trying. And it's hard to not appreciate the athleticism of ponies. And the special ones of them are so memorable that you can see them dancing across the horizon, mark of success. And some of those horses you're talking about, G-Man and Christmas, it's just phenomenal what some of these athletes do. And sitting behind one of them, after all the horses that you stare at, to watch a pony be able to put that together is a whole lot of fun. And I certainly appreciate how effortless it is for them to be able to put all that together. They're bred athletes, and it's fun to be a part of that.
Well, if you enjoyed good athletic ponies, then you must have been in your glory out on the West Coast when you were with Larry Bacon having Revelation, Poinsettia's Reality, Isle Party, Lady La Lake. That showstring of Art Birchers was right there in your backyard at those shows you.
You're missing one. Andiamo.
Andiamo.
Now, Andiamo is probably still the best road pony I ever got to see.
And a lot of people would say the same.
That's just my opinion. I got to watch that pony show an awful lot on the West Coast, and I'm not so sure that that pony could almost go with some horses as far as this. That pony was not to be believed unless you were there in person to watch that. And a few nights in California, Larry cut that pony loose, and it was something not to be missed. And I made it a point to go by there every time that I could to compliment them on that. And I never wanted to miss an opportunity when that thing went. But that pony was a mind blower for me. And I can still see him and Larry rolling around that ring, and I mean, lapping ponies. And I want to add that one. I don't mean to discount any of the others, but that one was an exciting thing that I want to include with that list.
I think 90% of the people would say Andiamo is the greatest they've ever seen as well. So for the younger viewers who are watching this right now who have never heard the name Juan Moore's Sharp-Dressed Man, who would later be renamed Panama Red, tell us what the pony be renamed yet again and what your role was in his development.
I got him as a young pony, I think a late 3-year-old, and we were able to show him as a 4-year-old. And that pony just kept getting better and better. And I had been around a few ponies, but this pony was just getting stronger and more consistent. And I didn't really get to do anything except just stay out of his way and let him just get older and bigger. And he just kept going. By the time we got up to Devon for Susan Phillips, that pony was ready to take on the world. And I don't think anybody could touch him at that point. He got it, he figured it out, and he really liked it. And to get all that combination together in a pony was quite an exciting thing to try to do. And unfortunately for the Leslie Schaefer, who had mentored him all the way through, he just a few months later, he breaks out, and he is a road pony phenomena. And Leslie had to sell right before that time, and she had a great eye. But that pony was a one of a kind, special, solid as a rock. A lot of these some of my ponies at least have been a little on the they're delicate, and they're a little tricky. That pony was just solid as a rock. You could send him, and you knew before you came out of the turn that he would be all there at the other end of that ring, and never dreamed on you that he would even waver mentally or physically. And I got spoiled badly with that pony. And you measure the rest of the stock that you have based on that pinnacle, and that's a pretty high mark to get. So they all have to be measured according to what he was like at that age.
So of course, ladies and gentlemen, the pony we're referring to, Mitch showed him as Panama Red. He would be sold to Susan Phillips, and Susan would rename the pony Free Willy. And I know everybody out there in recent years remembers Free Willy. Susan renamed the pony in honor of her son Matthew, who passed away quite young. Free Willy was his favorite movie, and so that's how the pony would be renamed Free Willy. Grand pony. I know Rich and Maureen Campbell had him, and I believe he actually still is at Majestic Oaks and might even be part of their driving lesson program. I know Maureen absolutely loves that pony. So great road pony. Diamond showing off, Mitch. Nice cobtail pony that you showed for Leslie Schaefer. He competed in some tough years down there. I mean, he had to go against Heartland Equality when he was in his heyday at Louisville, and then you had to face Rob Tanner and Heartland Rain Song at Kansas City when she was probably the best she ever was. He was a great pony. Tell us about Diamond showing off.
It was a wonderful pony, but you're right, a pony that came at the wrong time because, man, we were picking on freaks and tickled to death to be a part of that. And he was a big moving pony, and he had no trouble making full of account of himself when he was able to avoid the top part of the pony Prodigy at that time. But Rainmaker, holy moly, I can still see that mare bouncing around that ring, and it's hard to drive your pony and not stare at the one across the way because you definitely want to see, oh, how's she? Oh yeah, she's a freak again tonight. You better take. And so then you back to the business at hand. But that's the hardest part for him was that he just came with so many wonderful quality ponies that were out at that same time. But it still was a whole lot of fun being in the ring with those ponies and being a part of the pony industry that if you enjoy ponies and athletes and stuff like that, it's just nice to have stuff that can trot and make a good account of yourself. And then you get a little closer to those special ones. And I'm just tickled to have had the opportunity to show with those and had a lot of fun, and they taught me things. And some of those I get to use with horses as well. And that I'm indebted to them for that as well.
Lamborghini would add a pony world grand championship to your resume in 1991 when you drove him to win the Roadster Pony Tricolor. He looked to be at his best when he was just on the edge of coming off his feet. Was he tough to drive?
I thought he was tough, but he was right on the edge. And when he was really good, it was when he was about to jump off his feet. So as you came out of the turn and you sent him down through there, you were always talking to yourself and having small, short prayers that you would get to the other end and he'd still be on his feet and still be going. He heard everything in an arena. And so it just depends on how quiet it was. The more quiet it was, the easier the drive was. The louder it was, the more difficult it was to hold him together because he would get so caught up in the excitement that he could come off his feet if you were not careful. Lots of fun.
Another powerful road pony shown under your banner was Cruisin' Susan. Was she as powerful as she looked? She looked like just an absolute powerhouse.
She was, and I was tickled to get her. That was through Leslie again. And we had gotten a different pony, and then Leslie said, this one's not going to make it. I'm not happy with this. I'm going to go out and I'm going to trade for another pony. So she went out and she brought this one and organized a trade. I stayed out of the way and found that her eye was way better on young ponies than mine would ever be. I didn't even want to try. And so she brought this mare, and we started making her a road pony, and the longer we worked her, the faster she got. And I never had, the whole time that I showed her, I never had another pony pass me ever once. Never had a pony even get just up with her. She was really fast, and unlike Lamborghini, fun because she was not going to come off her feet no matter what happened. She'd stay on her feet. So you could drive with a lot more, you could actually enjoy the drive while you're driving her because you weren't going to have to worry about her flying off her feet. So she was a whole lot of fun, lots of speed, and had a lot of fun with her. A lot of fun. And you know, if you have a pony that will give you the unique opportunity of actually being able to go in there on Saturday night, it's a pretty cool deal. And I recommend it to all pony owners that are aspiring to anything. Do not avoid that opportunity if you can. It is very special to go in if you get lucky enough to have one. And I hope it happens to them. It certainly was fun for me.
Yeah, there's nothing like the green shavings on Saturday night. Thankfully, I can say I've done it. Thankfully, I can say my father got to do it. And hopefully I'm not done yet. So Mitch, saddlebreds, hackneys, Morgans, but never a road horse. Why?
The opportunity just never presented itself. I enjoy them and have enjoyed watching some of the greatest ones that are out there, but never had an owner that wanted a road horse. They all wanted to ride. And so I've never had an owner that was interested enough to want to go out and buy one. And I would be snobbish enough to not want just a road horse. I want a pretty special one, and just never got the opportunity. But I'm an awful big fan of them. I sure enjoy them.
So Mitch, it is now 5 a.m. in South Africa. When we started the interview, it was 3 a.m., so it's safe that your in-laws weren't up. So you better be careful now how you answer this question. You married Vicky Botha in 2002. So tell us about the Botha family and how you and Vicky met.
Well, we shared common friends in the horse business. My grandfather had exported horses to South Africa in the 60s. And then the last assistant trainer my grandfather had, I replaced, and he went to South Africa and spent the rest of his life there. And his name was Harold Poyle. And Harold reshaped as far as the show industry and set a standard where everybody was going to have to be a lot better to beat him. And I kept up with South Africa, read the magazines that he sent back to my grandfather to read. And over a period of time, met some quality people over there that liked horses and became friends with several of them, and found out later Vicky's the first girl I ever hired in my barn. Never had a girl help before, and she was the first one that I tried on again. And we found that we shared a lot of the same friends and people that I'd known for a long period of time. And I've been to South Africa, I don't know, 20 times probably now, and judged most of the horse shows over there, and have always enjoyed that. And we met through the other friends, and then she came to work for me. And when she came to work for me, I don't think we dated for a year and a half. I think she worked for me, and she worked hard. And I was always amazed at her work ethic and her ability to not back up with whatever we asked her to do. And it just became a good friendship that made more sense to progress. And so I caught her at a weak moment, and she may or may not regret it since, but that's kind of how the horses brought us together from all the way across the water.
Great story. Now, you and Vicky have bred and raised some very nice saddlebreds over the years. Where does the breeding prefix Ridgefield come from? I assume there's a history there.
This farm was originally Ridgefield Farm. And Ridgefield, if you go back to Wing Commander, that my grandfather showed a stallion for E.P. Edwards, and that horse's name was Ridgefield's Genius. And Ridgefield's Genius and my Uncle Frank had Easter Parade, and those two horses were probably the most competition for Wing Commander. In fact, I think there's even an 8mm film from the Lexington Junior League of those three horses working. And if you watch that gaited stake on a Sunday afternoon because of rain, you can decide who you thought really won the class. But this farm was established way back before the 40s, and Ridgefield was the prefix, and we've tried to keep this farm with that identification throughout the years, and that's where it started from.
Okay. You selected Coconut Frosting, stud colt by Undulata's Nutcracker out of Attachay's Born Beautiful, to replace Castle Bravo. Castle Bravo produced the 2009 Fine Harness World Grand Champion Castle Dream. Why did you not keep a stallion son of Castle Bravo to breed with?
There wasn't any strategy there. We weren't real sure whether or not we were going to keep on breeding or what we were going to try to do. We had a lot of semen that we had been able to be fortunate enough to freeze of his, and just didn't have a real, stallions are a lot of work, especially if you're going to stand them. And if you're going to keep one foot in the training barn, it's awfully hard to keep the other foot in the breeding part and be able to hold the breeding part up. I can easily manage halfway doing both, but I didn't really want to do that. And so I felt like our energies were going to be better in one direction more than another one. So Vicky went on and decided to go ahead with this other horse, and is able now she's got a breeding lab and transfers embryos and does all of this stuff, and is quite capable. And I stay out of her way, and I let her, she tells me what she needs, and we try to make that happen. So
Vicky's the breeding expert in the operation.
When you take a show mare and you put 4 embryos in 4 different studs, and the mare never misses a show that year, I would call her an expert. And all 4 colts are doing well. That was for a client of ours, so she knows it forwards and backwards, and has got the contacts for the tough to get together the mares. And then we foal out some mares here as well for clients that just don't want that added. I'd hate to have something go wrong here in the 9th hour, so we take some of that up for some of those guys as well. So she is the breeding expert, and I am I'm the helper. That's the best I could describe myself at.
Do you have some Castle Bravo mares in your breeding program?
Not enough. We do have a few, and I don't have as many as I'd like. And we've leased a couple of other Castle Bravo mares as well. And the key to them is that they are such great thinking horses as far as training. And so it ends up being something that I wished I'd kept more of, simply because they have such a stable training mind that you don't go over you make a lot of progress, and you don't go over the same road more than once, because those horses are pretty smart, and they sort of get it. And we don't have as many as we'd like, but we're always on the search for another one when we can find it.
How many foals do you expect this year at your place?
Not very many, because of the outlook and what I felt like was going to be the expectations of the supply and demand based on the virus and everything else that we've had. I once again have reminded myself how truly wrong I get it. I have about 2 mares to foal and didn't breed the rest of them. And we are now enjoying probably the highest demand for saddlebreds show horses that we've had. And I've just talked to 3 other trainers. There's more people looking for horses right now than they have been looking in the last 3 years. And I think it is a commendable thing that owners are tired of being at home. They want to change the scenery. They'd like to go to a horse show. Horse shows are outside shows. They're pretty safe. And I interrupted my feeding program based on the thought that I thought there might not be the same type of demand that there normally is. And I got that wrong again, because they're rocking and rolling, and people are out there trying to buy them as fast as you can make them. So we seem like we're in an awfully good area. And for us to be able to sustain the test that we've had in this past year lets me believe that this industry is going to be alive and well for my kids if they want to do this as well.
On top of coconut frosting, you also have Stallions Ridgefield's Signature by I'm a New Yorker out of Signature, and Not Dark Yet by S.A. Dorian Warrior Song out of Ridgefield's Varina. Do you stand these stallions to outside mares?
Sure, we do. And the New Yorker horse has already had a black horse called a black colt called Black Velvet. He won the yearling futurity at Louisville several years ago, and he got hurt as a colt, and we were fortunate enough to be able to buy him. And he's a very athletic horse, and we've got several nice young horses that are coming along that are athletic as well. And so we're tickled to have him, and as along with the rest of them. And yeah, you just call Vicky and she'll hook you up.
Perfect. Mitch, you are incredibly humble for the accomplishments that you've had in the saddle horse industry. How were you able to stay so grounded when you were campaigning horses like Skywatch and Memory Citation, Cameo's Angel Wings, M80? Was there ever a time that maybe you weren't so humble?
Probably other people might have perceived that as probably being the case. I'd like to think that wouldn't be the answer. I I had a very successful grandfather that certainly outshined me by a long shot. He had a brother, but the time you end up growing up with those two guys and you watch how they conducted themselves, uh, you didn't need to have much swagger in your walk. You just needed to be thankful the horses that have been touched, uh, that you were able to have some contact with. And I would like to take most of my example set by those guys in that they didn't let most of their success go to their heads. And I grew up watching that happen, and it you would like to hope that you're as an attractive loser as you might be a winner. And the best thing to do is to be very thankful and to be, I think, very appreciative of someone else's nice horse, and to not realize that, oh, if I only had that horse kind of thing. I don't spend much time with that, but I certainly enjoy seeing a wonderful horse, and I'm tickled to death with whoever has it. And so there's just so far and few, and they're so hard to come by that I don't waste much energy on the rest of it. I just hope that I don't miss them going and get that enthusiasm that I get to go back in that barn. It's kind of like a B12 shot for me. I end up with more energy, and I'm invigorated to keep on pushing because I've seen a nice horse, and I'd like to go try to make another one and share it with somebody.
How special was it for you to be inducted into the World Championship Horse Show Hall of Fame in 2014?
It's quite a thing to be recognized with. I remember when they put my grandfather in, and you're in with some pretty special people. Uh, I felt a little inadequate with some of the names that are on that wall and some of the things that they had done. But at the same time, I was very appreciative and hoped that and I was tickled that someone else had acknowledged that you had some contribution to the industry, and I left it at that and was tickled to have been a part of it.
You mentioned your sons earlier. Your sons, Mitchell and Garland, are now showing. Do you see the same level of excitement and love of horses in them that you had at their age?
No, that fortunately they're not totally consumed like me. They have a lot of other options that I probably did not have, as they are growing up in a completely different age in this country than me. I had to invent most of my entertainment, and found myself in the barn needing money for this and that, and I probably spoiled them to a certain degree, and not having to do as much of that. They certainly enjoy horses, and they really very much enjoy horse shows, and have grown up in a truck from the time they were about 3 months old, going across the country from one show to another. And you can ship them to South Africa, and when you get there, they ask where the next plane is. So they're broke to ship, and they travel well, and they enjoy horse shows, and they don't go off their feed when they're on the road. So I think we're doing something pretty good.
Perfect. Now, will you encourage them to carry on the Clark name in the saddlebred industry when you retire?
I'll make that happen if they're interested in doing that. I'll do what I can to support them and understand them if they don't want to do that. But I want them to be fulfilled in whatever they charge, and I hope they find something that they can love. I certainly am appreciative of me being able to know at a very young age that I felt like I didn't know if I'd be any good at this, but I knew I loved it, and I certainly wanted to try to apply myself with that. And I was fortunate enough to have a family that could give me that opportunity to ruin a countless number of young horses as you try to find your way into how to get some of it right. And luckily at that time we had Tattersalls, and we supplied Tattersalls on a regular calendar. And I take a lot of credit for putting a lot of those colts through Tattersalls as I'm learning what to do. It's a good thing he was only a $900 colt to start with, because I probably enhanced him to a $700 value by the time we got to the But you got to run your share of them, and I was lucky enough to be able to have that opportunity.
What's the old saying? What's the easiest way to become a millionaire in the horse business? Start out with 2 million. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Point well taken.
There you go. I have a video in my collection of a clinic that you did at Denise Vespera's many, many years ago. You still do clinics, a few clinics to this day.
Sure.
How much do you still enjoy teaching and sharing your knowledge?
Enjoy it more now than when I first started. I've done this off and on pretty much for the last, I don't know, 30 years. And I probably enjoy it more now than I've ever have in it. I think it's because you're working with young riders or you're working with new riders. There's enthusiasm that you identify with, that your first awareness is that enthusiasm that you're recognizing is the enthusiasm that you didn't get on the plane with. And you immediately find it through them, and I leave invigorated, psyched, ready to get back to they lift me, and I really enjoy, and they remind me why the addiction is so strong and why it's something that you can't shake for a lifetime. But it's fun helping somebody who is trying to get better at applying himself on how to show a horse, how to ride a horse, that type of thing. And anything that you can do to try to help them, you're simply hoping that they will get and be the recipient of some of the stuff that's happened to me that has made the difference in my life and how I've been able to enjoy it.
How important is it for established trainers like yourself to welcome and teach young horsemen and horsewomen that want to try and make a go of it in the industry?
Well, excuse me, I think it's probably something that we need. Part of the reason would be that when I started out, and certainly the generation before me, you probably were not going to make it in this industry if you were not mentored by for a better way of putting it, almost a master horseman. And you would be willing to work for somebody almost for no salary at all if they would just let you spend the time in their barn and observe what was going on and be part of that staff. We don't get a chance to do as much of that now as we did back then. And so to have another opinion or another way to probably get to that destination is probably something that I feel like it can't hurt. It can't hurt to hear another way of doing it. Simply, hopefully, is helpful and will help somebody as they're on their journey trying to get where they're trying to go.
How proud are you of, or when you see people that worked for you, like Smith Lilly, Peter Cowart, Craig Clapp, people like that? How proud are you when you see the success that they have in their careers?
You know, it's more fun watching them in their success almost than if it actually happened to you, because you met them when they were first getting started. They certainly have come all this way. And if for no other reason than personally, you were able to know them as they were trying to get started and they have applied themselves to this point. It's a pleasure to know them and be a part of that, simply because you don't get to do this without an awful lot of toil and unsung effort. And to watch all that come to fruition and for these guys to go ahead and end up on top is it's a wonderful thing to watch. And it's just a cool thing, because I knew you back then, and I've look how hard you've worked, and how could you not be proud of something like that and thoroughly enjoy it? So that's my thought on it.
Well, there's a saying in the show horse, or the show business, leave the stage while they're still clapping. Mitch, I have a feeling that they're clapping right now. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to speak to me tonight, and I wish you and your family all the best in the future. This has been incredible for me. I can't even describe how much fun this has been for me. And the last 6 weeks waiting for this to happen, it's been incredible. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're certainly welcome, and I appreciate you pushing me past my inability to want to talk about myself. I'm not very comfortable doing that, and I apologize for the power outage. It felt an awful lot like a workout that didn't occur.
Well, we got back on, and big thanks to Mitch Clark at at the Danville end for getting us back on. We had a little bit of a minor glitch, but we got her back on schedule. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to Saturday Night Tack Room Talk this year. It has been a fun series getting to know some of the show horse industry's great personalities. If any of you out there have a horse show, an auction, a fundraiser, any event that you'd like to promote, drop me a line, and I'll be happy to have you join me live on Facebook to spread the word. I wish everybody the best of luck in 2021. Take care. Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you very much. Good night. Good luck.